I hid from my cheating wife that I had a secret life as a combat officer and FBI agent. What happens when you discover that the person closest to you has been plotting your death all along? This shocking twist will leave you speechless. In today's video, you'll uncover the dangerous betrayal and how one man, once unaware of the dark plot, fights back with nothing but pure determination. Will he survive? Keep watching to find out how this thrilling story unfolds, and stick around for the jaw-dropping ending that no one saw coming. It was a quiet evening, the kind that had become all too familiar in recent months. The house was still. The only sound was the soft tapping of my fingers on the laptop as I sifted through the reports of the day's cases. Lennox sat across from me, sipping his coffee, his eyes never leaving his phone. I could feel the distance between us growing wider by the day, but I couldn't pinpoint why. The silence between us had a weight to it, a tension that wasn't there before. It was as if the air had thickened, become suffocating. I kept telling myself it was just a phase, that we were in a rut and everything would be fine. But deep down, something was wrong. I could feel it, a nagging instinct that kept whispering at the back of my mind. Lennox hadn't always been like this. We had once been inseparable, partners in every sense of the word. He'd been my rock, my protector. But something had changed, and I didn't know if it was him, me, or something in the air around us. I tried not to pry, not to ask too many questions. But every time I caught a glimpse of him staring at me with that faraway look in his eyes, I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew. What he didn't know, though, was that I had my own secrets. Vespera wasn't the only one hiding something. But that was the life I'd chosen. The life we'd chosen. When Lennox had started working for the FBI, he had sworn to keep me safe, to protect me from the dangers he faced in his line of work. But in doing so, he had kept me in the dark, forced me to live in a world of shadows, not knowing exactly who or what he was. For years, I had accepted that, justified it by telling myself it was for the greater good. I had trusted him, and that trust had made me blind to the cracks forming in our relationship. Still, I never questioned him. Until tonight. I didn't intend to find out the truth. In fact, I wasn't looking for trouble. I was simply heading upstairs to grab a file I needed for work. The soft click of the door as I passed by our bedroom stopped me in my tracks. At first, I thought nothing of it. But then I heard her voice, Vespera's voice. It was low, almost a whisper, and for a moment, I thought I had imagined it. "Darling," she said, her tone filled with sweetness that felt so foreign, so unlike her usual indifference. I froze, listening. Vespera never called me darling. Not anymore. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The voice on the other end of the phone responded. It was a man, his voice smooth and confident. I couldn't hear everything they were saying, but I heard enough. Enough to make my stomach drop. "It's all set," he said. "I've told them where to find him. Just send the thugs, and it'll be done." My mind raced. I leaned against the wall for support, struggling to process what I had just heard. "Don't worry," she continued. "He's clueless. He won't see it coming." Clueless? She wasn't just cheating on me, she was plotting my death. The woman I had married. The woman I had trusted. The woman I had promised to protect. She was planning to kill me. I didn't burst in. I didn't confront her. Years of FBI training kicked in. Patience. Caution sat control. I slipped away silently, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't about anger. Not yet. It was about survival. I needed to think, to make a plan. I descended into the basement, the only place I could think clearly. The basement was more than just a storage space. It was my sanctuary, my safe haven. It was where I kept my files, my backup plans, my weapons. I sank into the worn-out chair by my desk and stared at the wall of case files. My mind replayed her words over and over again. Each sentence was a bullet, each one hitting me harder than the last. How could she do this? How long had she been planning this? The anger came first, hot and blinding. How could she betray me like this? But then, as quickly as it came, the rage gave way to clarity. This wasn't about emotions. It was about survival. I opened the secure laptop I kept hidden in the basement. I wasn't the simple logistics manager I had led her to believe. I wasn't just some mild-mannered man going about his day. I had lived through war zones. I had faced down threats that would have broken most men. And now, The woman I had once loved, the woman I had stood by for years, was on the other side. I wasn't going to make the mistake of reacting impulsively. I wasn't going to let anger cloud my judgment. I had a job to do, a plan to execute. I pulled up the surveillance software I had installed years ago. Cameras, secure channels. I had everything I needed to track her, to find out who she was meeting, what she was planning. As I watched the footage from around the house, I couldn't help but feel a cold emptiness. She thought I was clueless. She thought I was weak. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I reached out to my partner, Sarah Carter, the one person I could trust in all of this. She answered on the second ring. "Jason, what's going on? I need your help," I said, keeping my voice steady. "It's personal." There was a brief pause. Sarah wasn't used to me asking for help with personal matters. "What kind of personal?" she asked. I hesitated, but I couldn't keep it to myself any longer. "Lila's affair. She's planning to have me killed. And she's working with someone named Evan." Sarah's tone shifted immediately. "Jason, you need to get out of there." "No," I replied firmly. "I'm not leaving. I'm going to handle this." "You're too close to this," she warned. "You're not thinking clearly." "I've never been more clear," I replied. "Just trust me. I need you to have my back." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, finally, Sarah sighed. "Fine. But don't do anything reckless." I spent the rest of the night going over everything I knew about Vespera. Every text, every call, every moment that now seemed to point to a woman who had checked out of our marriage long before the plot to kill me ever started. I reviewed the footage of her late-night meetings, her new clothes, the way she avoided my gaze when we spoke. She had been lying to me for months, maybe even longer. And all this time, I had been blind to it. I thought about the day we had met, the promise I had made to protect her. How could I have missed this? Why hadn't I seen the signs? By the time I climbed into bed that night, Vespera was already asleep. Her face, serene and peaceful, looked nothing like the woman who had just plotted my death. It was almost a cruel irony. How could someone so beautiful be so full of darkness? I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, formulating a plan. A plan to turn the tables, to show her who I really was. By the time this was over, she wouldn't be the one in control anymore, because I wasn't just her husband. I wasn't just the man she thought she had trapped. I was a trained combat officer, a former soldier, an FBI agent, and I was ready for war. As I drifted off to sleep, one thought consumed me. I was going to make her regret ever thinking she could get away with this. The morning light filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows across the room. I hadn't slept much. The night before, I'd spent hours glued to the screen, replaying every moment of my conversation with Sarah, every word. Vespera had spoken on the phone, and the chilling reality that had settled over me like a thick fog. I knew what had to be done, but the question kept echoing in my mind. How long had she been planning this? It was hard to believe the woman I had once trusted with my life was capable of such betrayal. I had to remind myself that this wasn't about emotions anymore. This was about survival. I stared at the clock. It was 7:30 am, and the house was eerily quiet. Vespera was still in bed, likely still in her little world of lies. The smell of coffee wafted up the stairs, but I didn't feel like drinking it. My thoughts were too loud, too jumbled. I paced around the kitchen, staring at the surveillance feed I had set up last night, watching the footage of Vespera's every move in the house, piecing together what I knew. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. I needed more. I hadn't let on to her that I was aware of everything. I kept my distance, hiding my intentions behind a calm, controlled exterior. I needed her to think I was clueless. That was the only way I could play this right. She had no idea I was already steps ahead, watching her every move like a hawk. The phone buzzed. It was Sarah. "Jason, what's the update?" she asked. Her voice calm, but I could hear the concern there. Sarah had been my partner in the field for years, but this was personal, and I could sense her hesitation. "I'm in," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "I've got everything. I'm keeping an eye on her. I'm going to let her think everything's fine. I can't make any moves until I have all the pieces." "You're getting too close to this, Jason," Sarah warned, her voice sharp now. "You know what's at stake." "I know," I replied, my grip tightening on the phone. But this isn't just about saving myself anymore. This is about exposing her, about exposing what she's really capable of. I ended the call before she could respond, my mind already turning over what I needed to do next. I had to stay calm, stay focused. Vespera would be getting up soon, going about her day like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I wasn't the man she thought I was. She wasn't the woman I thought she was either. I grabbed my phone and checked the latest message from her lover, Evan. It was from late last night, right before I'd heard her plan. "How's everything looking?" he had written. "You ready to make the move?" Her reply came quickly, "Just waiting on him to go out of town. The plan will go off without a hitch." My stomach tightened at the thought of what she was willing to do. To me. To us. She had played the game so well, so convincingly, that I hadn't seen it coming. But now, I knew the truth. I couldn't let her get away with it. I made my way to the living room, my movements slow and deliberate. I didn't want to make any noise. The last thing I needed was for her to realize I was onto her. She came down the stairs a few minutes later, her hair still damp from the shower, a light smile on her face. She looked almost normal, almost innocent. It made my skin crawl. "Good morning," she said, her tone light, casual, as though nothing had changed. As though she hadn't just planned my murder with her lover the night before. "Morning," I replied, my voice flat. I didn't let on that anything was wrong. I didn't let on that I knew. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat down at the table, scrolling through her phone like she had every other morning. But I noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes flicked to me every now and then, as if she was trying to gauge my reaction. Was she already starting to doubt me? Was she sensing that something was off? The thought made my pulse race, but I kept my expression neutral, my body language relaxed. I had to stay in control. I had to let her think I was still the man she'd been fooling. I wasn't. I wasn't the clueless husband she thought she could manipulate anymore. "Any plans today?" she asked, glancing up at me. I kept my face impassive. "Just work. You?" "Oh, nothing much," she said, her eyes darting away from mine. "Might go to lunch with Monica. You remember Monica, right? Monica. Her best friend. The one I never trusted. Something about Monica always seemed off, but I had never been able to put my finger on it. And now, it seemed, she was involved in all of this. I couldn't let her play any more parts in Vespera's twisted little game. "Yeah, I remember," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Tell her I said hi." I watched as she left the house a short while later. The door clicked shut behind her, and the moment she was gone, I locked the door behind me and headed straight to the basement. I wasn't wasting any more time. This had to end now. I pulled up the surveillance footage, the cameras I had installed throughout the house streaming live to my laptop. I wasn't going to miss a single detail. I watched her movements from the moment she stepped outside until she reached her car. She was meeting someone. Of course she was. It wasn't until later that I would piece together just how deep this had gone. The next few hours passed in a blur. I monitored every message, every call. When Vespera returned home, she acted like everything was normal. She kissed my cheek, asked about my day. I played along, keeping my answers short, my demeanor unbothered. But inside, everything was different. Everything had changed. As the night wore on, I felt the anger building again, sharper this time. But I couldn't let it take control. I had a plan, and I wasn't going to let my emotions destroy it. I kept watching her, waiting. When she finally sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone, I saw the same unease in her eyes. She was nervous. She was paranoid. It was all starting to crack. She had been so confident before, so sure that I wouldn't figure it out. But now I could see the doubt creeping in. She thought I was clueless. She thought I couldn't touch her. She was wrong. I stayed on the couch, pretending to watch TV, but my mind was on her, on Evan, on the plan. The tension between us grew thicker by the minute. I had to strike soon, but I needed to be sure. The next morning, I sent a message to Sarah. I wasn't about to make any moves without backup. "Everything's set. I've got everything I need. I'll handle it from here," she replied almost instantly. "Be careful. We don't know what we're dealing with yet." I didn't respond. She was right, of course. But I had no choice. The pieces were in place. This had to end. I wasn't going to let them win. Vespera continued with her charade, pretending that nothing had changed, that everything was fine. But I saw it now, all the cracks in her carefully constructed facade. And soon, she would see that I was no longer the man she thought she could deceive. I wasn't going to let her win. I was done playing the fool. This was my fight now. Just when you think everything is under control, a shocking twist threatens to change everything. Will the truth about his secret life finally come out? And how will his wife react when the full extent of his past is revealed? Stay tuned, because things are about to get even more intense. Comment below. What do you think will happen next? Comment 1. If you think will he expose his secret? Comment 2. If you think keep it hidden. The following days felt like an eternity. Each passing moment stretched out, but I stayed focused, constantly watching, listening, and waiting. Every text message from Vespera, every call she made, each movement, no matter how small, felt like a piece of the puzzle slowly falling into place. I had to stay sharp. I couldn't afford to make a mistake. Not now. The game had changed. This wasn't just about catching her in a lie anymore. This was about survival. I spent hours, days even, combing through every detail of her life I could find. The private investigator I'd hired earlier had gathered some useful information, but it wasn't enough. I had to know everything, every little thing that Vespera and her lover, Kairos, had been planning. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how deep this betrayal ran. One evening, while Vespera was out, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I went through her things, the drawers she never let me touch, the personal items she thought I'd never dare look through. It felt wrong, violating even, but I couldn't let that stop me. There were things I needed to know. I dug through her papers, the receipts from her latest shopping sprees. I had never been invited to join and found something that made my blood run cold. There, in the middle of a pile of receipts for jewelry and clothes, was a handwritten note with the words, "He'll be out by Friday. Meet at the usual spot. Don't forget the phone call." I froze. I stared at the note for what felt like hours, trying to make sense of it. Friday. That was just 2 days away. It was the night they were planning to kill me. The date was there, in black and white. I had known she was involved. But seeing the plan laid out so plainly, so matter-of-factly, felt like a slap in the face. I carefully put the note back where I had found it, fighting the urge to throw it across the room. No. I had to keep calm. I couldn't let my emotions get in the way now. I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to wait around for Friday to come. I couldn't. I had to act now, while I still had time. I reached for my phone and called Sarah, my FBI partner, the only person I trusted in all of this. Her voice came through quickly, a mix of concern and professionalism. "Jason, what's going on? You're starting to sound urgent." "I'm running out of time," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I've got the plan. They're moving on Friday. I need you to get everything in place." There was a pause, and I could almost hear her brain whirring as she processed what I was saying. "Jason, this is big. Are you sure you want to move that fast? You don't know what kind of backup they have, what they're capable of." "I'm not waiting any longer," I snapped, frustration creeping into my voice. "I need you to pull in a team. Make sure we're ready. I've got everything they're planning. We move on Friday, but I need to make sure we have every angle covered." "All right," Sarah said after a beat. "I'll get things rolling. Just be careful, okay? You're too close to this, Jason. You can't lose yourself in this fight." "I won't," I said, though I wasn't sure if I believed myself. This wasn't just about catching her anymore. This wasn't just about stopping a cheating wife. This was a war, and war wasn't clean. It wasn't neat. It was messy, full of chaos, and it often cost more than you were willing to pay. I hung up the phone and sat in the dimly lit living room, staring at the clock. Friday was so close. My heart raced in my chest, but I forced myself to focus. I couldn't afford to make mistakes. Not when so much was at stake. The next few days felt like a blur. I gathered every bit of evidence I could find: photos, videos, recordings of the phone calls between Vespera and Kairos. I traced the addresses they mentioned in their conversations, finding their meeting spots, their hidden locations. I studied every movement, every slip-up, every tiny detail that could be used against them. I was careful. I was methodical. And I knew I was running out of time. Then came the night before Friday, and everything changed. I had gotten used to the quiet moments, the stillness that settled over the house when Vespera was out. But that night, as I sat in front of my computer, reviewing the final bits of evidence, I heard the door creak open. It was later than usual. My eyes flicked to the screen, but the figure I saw through the window wasn't Vespera. It wasn't someone I recognized at first. I stood up instinctively, my hand reaching for the gun I had kept hidden in the drawer for weeks. The figure moved across the yard, their shadow stretching long in the moonlight. I couldn't risk it. If they were coming for me tonight, I had to be ready. I moved quickly, silently. I checked the cameras one last time and saw the man Kairos making his way toward the house. My stomach tightened, but I couldn't afford to hesitate. He was here for a reason, and I wasn't about to let him slip through my fingers. I crept into the hallway, staying in the shadows, my breath shallow. I had expected to make my move on Friday, but this was different. I couldn't let him get to her. Not like this, not tonight. Kairos reached the back door, but he didn't break in. Instead, he stood there, his figure barely visible through the frosted glass. He was waiting for something. For someone. My mind raced. Was he waiting for Vespera to arrive? Was he just scouting the place out? My instincts screamed at me to act, but I couldn't risk it. Not yet. I watched him, tracking every movement, analyzing every detail. He wasn't alone. Then, I saw another figure in the shadows. Another man, this one larger than Kairos. A hired gun, probably, a goon from the same criminal network Kairos was tied to. My heart slammed in my chest. They weren't here to just scare me. They were here to finish the job. But I was ready. I had been waiting for this moment for far too long. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I grabbed my phone and dialed Sarah's number, my hands trembling slightly despite my best efforts to remain calm. "They're here," I said, my voice tight. "They're already at the house. It's happening tonight." "Damn it, Jason," Sarah muttered on the other end. "I'm pulling in a team now. Just hold tight. Don't do anything reckless." "I won't," I replied, though my mind was already on the move, calculating my next steps. The endgame had begun, and there was no turning back. The days following my discovery were a whirlwind of action. Every minute felt stretched, as if the hours themselves had become heavier. I wasn't going to sit back and let them get away with it. I had to stay one step ahead, and every move I made now had to be calculated, methodical, precise. Time was running out. Every moment Vespera and Kairos thought they had me fooled was another moment I could use to turn the tide in my favor. I spent countless hours in the basement, staring at the computer screen, analyzing every bit of footage, every word spoken. I mapped out their plan, their every move, trying to anticipate what would come next. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became, they had underestimated me. They thought I was just a regular guy, a man who had no idea what was really going on in his own home. But they were wrong. I had been living a double life for years, first as a soldier, and then as an FBI agent, and I knew how to wait. How to strike when it was least expected. By the time I received word from Sarah, my nerves were already on edge. She was running the operation from her end, coordinating with the team and securing the resources I needed. But I couldn't rely entirely on her. This wasn't just another case. This wasn't just about bringing down a criminal. It was about reclaiming my life. About taking control back from the people who had tried to tear everything apart. "Jason," Sarah's voice crackled through the phone as I sat at my desk, the glow from my laptop the only source of light in the otherwise dark basement. "I've got the intel. We've been tracking Kairos, and he's been in contact with someone in your neighborhood. There's a backup plan. He's not acting alone. We need to move quickly." I leaned forward, my hands gripping the edge of the desk as the reality of what she was saying sank in. This wasn't just about the affair anymore. It wasn't just about Vespera's betrayal. Kairos was part of something much bigger. Something that had deep roots, far beyond what I had initially realized. "How big are we talking?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the knot of dread forming in my stomach. "Big," Sarah replied, the tension in her voice unmistakable. "This goes beyond what we originally thought. This isn't just a hit. This is organized crime, and they've got more people in place than we anticipated. They're setting up for a full-scale operation." I felt a chill run down my spine. This was no longer just a personal vendetta. It was a battle against something far more dangerous. And it was happening in my own backyard. Have you pinpointed their location? I asked, my mind already racing through potential escape routes, backup plans, anything I could use to my advantage. We're close, she said, pausing for a moment. But we need you to stay put for now. Don't confront them yet. Not until we have more intel. If you make a move now, we risk tipping them off. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the rising tension in my chest. I hated being on the defensive, hated having to wait. But I knew Sarah was right. I had to stay patient. They were playing a game, and I was determined to win. For the next few hours, I kept to the shadows, silently observing every movement in and around the house. Vespera was still going about her business as if nothing had changed. She continued her charade, pretending to be the loving wife, the one who had no idea what was really happening. But every time I looked at her, every time I watched her move, I saw the cracks, the guilt in her eyes. She knew she was in too deep, but she wasn't willing to back out, not yet. The hours dragged on, but I didn't move. I stayed glued to the monitors, waiting for any sign that they were getting close to making their move. At this point, I knew I couldn't rely solely on Vespera to lead me to them. She was part of the plan, but she wasn't the mastermind. Kairos was the one I needed to watch. He was the one who was orchestrating everything behind the scenes. But what if he didn't come? What if he never showed up? What if all this time, I had been watching the wrong person? My thoughts spiraled. Anxiety crept in. The weight of it was starting to feel unbearable. But then I remembered the note, the one I had found days earlier. The plan was set for Friday. It was now Thursday night. If they were going to act, it would be soon. The sound of tires crunching on gravel broke through my thoughts. I straightened up, my hand instinctively reaching for the gun I kept hidden under my desk. I had no idea who it was, but I had been waiting for this moment. It was time. I glanced through the basement window, peering through the blinds just enough to catch a glimpse of the car that had just pulled into the driveway. The headlights were off, but the engine was still running. My heart raced as I recognized the sleek black sedan. I had seen that car before. It was the same car that had followed Vespera earlier in the week, the one that had been parked just down the street when I had caught her meeting Kairos. I was right. They were here. I grabbed my phone and quickly sent Sarah a message. They're here. It's happening tonight. The message was brief, but it conveyed everything she needed to know. It was go time. No more waiting. I moved silently, staying low to the ground as I crept up the stairs, inching toward the back door. The house was dark, but I knew the layout better than anyone. I knew where to hide, where to stand, and how to move without making a sound. I wasn't about to give them the upper hand. As I reached the back door, I could hear the faint sounds of footsteps outside. They were coming closer. The tension in my chest tightened, but I pushed it down. I wasn't going to let fear control me, not now. I had been preparing for this moment for too long. I slowly turned the knob, the cool metal feeling foreign in my hand. The door creaked slightly, but the sound was barely audible. I could see the figures approaching through the crack in the door, their shadows stretching long across the porch. I took a deep breath and swung the door open. "Freeze!" I shouted, my voice louder than I intended. The men froze in place, their eyes wide in surprise. I could see the weapons in their hands, the gleam of metal in the dim light. But they weren't expecting me. They weren't expecting someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Without hesitation, I moved, faster than they could react. One of the men reached for his gun, but I was already there, knocking it from his hands and pinning him against the wall. The other lunged at me, but I sidestepped him, using his momentum to send him crashing into the ground. "Where's Kairos?" I demanded, my voice cold as I stared down at the man who was struggling to get back to his feet. He glared up at me, breathing heavily. "You'll never stop him," he spat. I didn't care about his threats. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to stop until I got them. I grabbed him by the collar, lifting him off the ground. "Tell me where Kairos is," I shouted again, my voice low and dangerous. He looked like he might say something, but then his eyes shifted to something behind me. Too late. I was already ahead of him, and I wasn't going to let anything or anyone stop me. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating. As I dragged the two men into the basement, my mind racing through every possible outcome. The adrenaline surged through my veins, fueling every movement, every thought. I had them now, two of the thugs sent to finish me off, pinned down in my own home. But that wasn't enough. They were only pawns. I needed the king. I needed Kairos. And I needed to break them, break their resolve, before they realized just how far I was willing to go to take them down. I shoved the first thug into the chair, his eyes darting around the room, trying to find an escape that wasn't there. The other man, he was still trying to recover, struggling against the ropes I had already tied around his wrists. It was almost pathetic. These were supposed to be the people who had come to end me? They were amateurs at best. They weren't prepared for someone like me. I wasn't just going to sit back and wait for the inevitable. I was going to make them regret this. Who sent you? I asked, my voice cold, my tone low but firm. I didn't need to ask, but I wanted to hear them say it. Wanted to see the fear creeping into their eyes as they realized just how much trouble they were in. The thug in the chair scoffed, but there was something in his eyes that betrayed him. Fear. It was there, deep down. He wasn't as confident as he wanted to appear. I'm not telling you anything, you piece of, he started, but I wasn't about to let him finish. I leaned in close, my face inches from his, letting the silence hang in the air like a weapon. Sharp and deadly. You don't have a choice, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You can either tell me what I need to know, or I can make you regret not doing so. He flinched, his eyes darting to the door, as if he thought someone might come to his rescue. But no one was coming. No one except me. I was the one they should have feared. The second thug, still groaning from the rope burns on his wrists, shot a desperate glance at his partner. I knew he was weighing his options, but his fear was obvious. He wasn't going to be much help either. They were both trapped, and they knew it. It was only a matter of time before they cracked. But I wasn't going to wait for that. I needed answers now. I moved around the room, pacing as I kept my eyes on them. The feeling of power, of control, was overwhelming. I wasn't just holding them here, I was breaking them, slowly, methodically. And it was working. I stopped in front of the first thug again, who was sweating now, his breath quick and shallow. He wasn't as tough as he tried to appear. I leaned closer, so close I could feel his breath on my face. Where's Kairos? I asked, my voice just above a growl. For a moment, nothing. Just the sound of his panicked breathing and the creak of the chair beneath him. Then, finally, he spoke, his voice shaky. I don't know where he is, he stammered. I'm just a guy they brought in to do the job. I could see the lie in his eyes. I could hear the hesitation in his voice. He was lying to me, trying to keep something hidden. I wasn't having it. I reached out and grabbed the front of his shirt, pulling him out of the chair. You're lying, I said. Where is he? Tell me. He recoiled, eyes wide with fear. Look, man, I swear I don't know. They just told me to wait here. Kairos and the others were supposed to. Before he could finish his sentence, I grabbed the back of his head and slammed it against the cold concrete wall. The sickening crack of his skull hitting the wall echoed in the basement, and for a moment, everything went still. His body slumped, unconscious from the blow. I stepped back, breathing heavily, trying to steady myself. The anger that had been boiling inside me surged again, but I forced myself to stay calm. I wasn't going to let this get to me. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I turned my attention to the other thug, who was now trembling in his chair, eyes darting nervously between me and his partner's limp body. I walked over to him slowly, letting the silence build, letting the tension suffocate him. He knew what was coming next. I could see it in his eyes. You're next, I said, my voice low and dangerous. He swallowed hard, his eyes flicking to the door again. I don't know anything, he spat out. I swear I don't know anything. I wasn't buying it. I wasn't going to let him play me like that. You're going to tell me what I need to know, I said, my voice flat, cold. And you're going to do it now. I paced back and forth in front of him, watching him squirm. He was just a kid, probably didn't even know what he was getting into when he signed up for this. He was out of his depth. But that didn't matter. He was part of it now, and he was going to give me what I needed. Tell me where Kairos is, I demanded, my patience wearing thin. The thug trembled, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. For a moment, he just sat there, breathing hard, as if he were trying to find some way out. Then, finally, he cracked. He's meeting someone, he muttered. Somewhere on the outskirts of town. A warehouse. Tomorrow night. That's where he's going to be. I leaned in close, my face just inches from his. Who else is involved? I asked, my voice ice cold. He swallowed hard, but this time, he didn't hesitate. I don't know, he said quickly. I swear, I don't know. I'm just a guy trying to get paid, man. I didn't believe him. I didn't trust him. But at least I had a lead. A warehouse. Tomorrow night. It wasn't much, but it was something. And something was all I needed. I took a deep breath and straightened up. I had everything I needed. Kairos was close, but he wasn't invincible. And he had no idea what was coming for him. I turned my back on the thug, not bothering to look at him as I walked toward the door. You're free to go, I said over my shoulder. But I'd suggest you stay out of my way. With that, I left the basement, my mind already shifting to the next part of the plan. Tomorrow night, I would bring this to an end. Kairos wouldn't get away with this. Not if I had anything to say about it. The next day passed in a blur. I couldn't afford to waste any time. Everything was moving faster now. Kairos, his associates, Vespera, every part of their twisted web was coming into sharper focus. And I had to be ready for whatever came next. The lead I had gotten from the second thug was the break I needed. A warehouse on the outskirts of town. Tomorrow night. Kairos would be there. And that was where everything would end. I spent the day preparing, making sure everything was in place. The team Sarah had coordinated was ready, but they were operating in the shadows. I couldn't risk them getting too close just yet. This was my fight, and I needed to be in control. I knew the area around the warehouse. It wasn't the first time I'd walked those streets. I'd spent years tracking dangerous men, infiltrating criminal organizations. But this was different. This was personal. I gathered my equipment, checked my weapons, and made sure the surveillance gear was working. Every camera, every microphone, every piece of tech I had at my disposal, everything had to be perfect. I wasn't going to leave any room for error. As the sun began to set, I found myself standing in the shadow of the warehouse. The towering structure loomed ahead, cold and impersonal. It felt like a fortress, but I wasn't afraid of it. I had a plan. And this time, I wasn't going to be the one running scared. I checked my watch. 8:30 p.m. I knew they'd be coming soon. Kairos wouldn't waste time. The money was already in play, and Vespera, well, she was already a pawn in this game. She thought she had the upper hand, that her lover had everything under control. She had no idea how badly they'd underestimated me. I watched from the shadows as a black SUV pulled into the parking lot of the warehouse. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized the driver. It was one of the men I'd seen in the footage, one of the hired guns who'd been sent to kill me. I felt a surge of adrenaline, but I kept my breathing steady. This was it. The moment I'd been waiting for. The SUV came to a stop, and the door opened. Kairos stepped out, tall and confident, his presence commanding the night air. He walked toward the entrance of the warehouse without looking around, without a care in the world. He thought this was his victory. He thought he was untouchable. But he wasn't. Not anymore. I moved quickly, silently, slipping between the shadows like a ghost. My steps were deliberate, measured. I had learned to move like this over the years, always aware of my surroundings, always ready to strike. The time for waiting was over. It was time to confront the man who had orchestrated my destruction. As I neared the entrance, I saw the familiar faces of Kairos's men, stationed around the perimeter. They were expecting trouble, but not from me. I had trained for moments like this, moments when everything hinged on precision. I couldn't afford to make a sound, couldn't afford to be seen. I crouched low, staying hidden behind the large crates stacked outside the warehouse. My eyes never left Kairos as he entered the building. Flanked by two of his men, he moved with purpose, like he owned the world. He didn't know what was coming. He didn't know how badly he'd misjudged me. I pulled out my phone and sent a quick message to Sarah. I'm in position. They're inside. Be ready. I knew she'd be waiting for the signal. She and the team would move in once I gave the word, but for now, it was up to me. I had to make sure I had Kairos cornered before anyone else got involved. The minutes dragged on. Every second felt like an eternity. I could hear the muffled sounds of conversation from inside the warehouse. Kairos was meeting with someone. It had to be someone important. The deal was happening tonight, whatever it was. I wasn't going to let it go down without a fight. I waited until I saw a figure step out of the building. It was one of the men from the car earlier. He was talking to someone inside, but I couldn't hear the conversation. I had to move quickly. I knew the layout of the building. I'd studied it for hours. I knew the best route to take to get inside undetected. Taking a deep breath, I made my move. I slipped from behind the crates and moved toward the door, staying low to the ground. The security guards were distracted, their attention on the men coming and going. They didn't notice me. They didn't even know I was there. The door creaked slightly as I pushed it open, but it wasn't loud enough to raise suspicion. I slipped inside, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. The warehouse was a maze of metal beams, stacked crates, and shadows. I could feel the pulse of my heartbeat in my ears as I moved deeper into the building. I took cover behind a stack of crates and peered around the corner. There, in the center of the room, stood Kairos, talking to a man I hadn't seen before. The new figure was taller, older, probably someone with connections to the underworld. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I could see the way they were gesturing, the way Kairos was leaning in close. The deal was happening right there, and I wasn't about to let them slip away. I reached for the earpiece Sarah had given me, tapping it lightly. "It's time," I whispered. "Move in." I heard a crackle of static, followed by her voice, "We're in position. On your mark." I took another breath, steadying my hand on the gun at my side. This was it. The final step. I wasn't going to wait any longer. I moved silently, my every step calculated, my focus laser sharp. Kairos and his contact were still distracted, unaware of the danger closing in on them. I crept closer, my pulse racing. It was almost too easy, but I didn't let myself get cocky. I had been here before. I knew the risks. I wasn't going to take any chances. I rounded the corner, my gun raised, and I finally stepped into the open. Kairos froze, his eyes widening in surprise as he turned to face me. For a split second, I saw the panic in his eyes. He hadn't expected me to be this close, this fast. "Jason," he said, his voice a mix of surprise and disbelief. How did you? Surprised to see me?" I interrupted, my voice low and cold. "You should be. You've underestimated me from the start." I took a step forward, not giving him a chance to respond. "Where's the rest of your operation? Where's the money, Kairos? You're not walking away from this." He took a step back, trying to regain his composure. But I could see the cracks in his confidence. He wasn't as untouchable as he thought. And soon, he would learn just how wrong he was. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me as I stood there, facing Kairos in the center of the warehouse. His expression had shifted from one of smug confidence to sheer panic in a split second. And that was enough to let me know that I had him. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected me to be the one to confront him, to be the one standing between him and whatever plan he had so carefully laid out. But here I was, and it was my turn to take control. Kairos didn't speak at first, just took a step back, his eyes darting between me and the door, calculating his options. He knew he was cornered. His attempt to regain control of the situation was written all over his face. His body tense, muscles coiled like a spring, ready to snap. For a moment, everything felt suspended, like time had slowed, and all that existed was the tension between us. I could hear the soft hum of the lights above, and the distant echo of the city outside. But in that moment, it was as if the world had narrowed to the two of us locked in a deadly standoff. I didn't flinch. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of thinking I was nervous. I had been in far worse situations, had faced men more dangerous than him, and had come out the other side with the upper hand. But this felt different. This wasn't just some mission to take down a criminal. This wasn't about the thrill of the hunt or the satisfaction of bringing justice. This was about survival. It was personal. "You really thought you could get away with this?" I asked, my voice low, steady, like a calm before a storm. I wasn't just asking for an answer. I was letting him know that I had everything on my terms now. He was the one on the back foot. Kairos swallowed hard, his gaze flickering to the door again, but there was no way out now. Not for him. Not unless he had some hidden backup waiting to storm in. But from what I could tell, it was just him and his men in this place. They weren't coming. This was it. He was facing me alone. "What do you want, Jason?" Kairos finally spat, trying to regain some of his bravado. but I saw through it. His hand hovered near his waistband, no doubt thinking about his weapon. But he knew better than to make a move. I was faster than he realized, and I had all the leverage now. "I want you to tell me everything," I said, taking a step closer, closing the gap between us. His confidence was slipping, and I could see it in the way his shoulders tensed, the way his eyes kept darting to the side as if looking for an escape that wasn't there. "I want to know who you're working with. I want to know who else is involved in this little operation of yours," I pressed, my voice cutting through the silence. "You thought you could just waltz in here, take what you wanted, and walk away. But you were wrong. This is my game now, Kairos, and you're on the losing side." He was still trying to put up a front, but I could see the fear creeping into his eyes. He had no choice but to play along. He knew I wasn't the man he thought I was. He'd made a mistake underestimating me, and now he was going to pay for it. "You think you've got me cornered, huh?" Kairos sneered, trying to act tough. But I could hear the shake in his voice, the desperation creeping in. He wasn't as confident as he was trying to seem. "Not think," I corrected him, stepping closer, my voice cold. "I know I've got you. And there's nothing you can do about it." His jaw clenched, but he didn't respond right away. I could see the wheels turning in his head, weighing his options. The longer this dragged on, the more control I had. I wasn't going to give him a way out. Not now. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke, his voice quieter this time, laced with frustration. "You're wasting your time. You don't know what you're up against." "Oh, I know exactly what I'm up against," I said, my voice like ice. "And you're the one who's about to find out just how wrong you are." I wasn't going to let him spin this any longer. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the files I had gathered. The evidence of his dealings, the proof of his criminal connections, all laid out in front of him. His face went pale when he saw it. The documents, the photos, the timestamps, everything was there. There was no escaping this. "You've got a choice," I said, letting the weight of the moment settle in. "You can either tell me everything, and I'll make sure you're dealt with in a way that might keep you alive, or you can keep playing your little games, and I'll make sure you disappear without a trace." Kairos looked at the papers in front of him, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the evidence. I could see the fight in him, the desire to hold on to his power, but I also saw the resignation creeping in. He knew he was trapped. There was no getting out of this. "Not anymore. You're not going to get away with this," he said, his voice low, his gaze flickering to the door again, still hoping for some kind of miracle. "Victor won't let you. You think you've won, but it's just beginning." Victor. The name sent a chill down my spine, but I wasn't going to let it rattle me. Kairos was trying to use fear to buy himself more time. But it wasn't working. I had been in this game long enough to know when someone was bluffing. "Victor's not the one I'm worried about," I said, my voice steady. "You're the one who's about to lose everything. You're done, Kairos. And I'm going to make sure you stay that way." I wasn't just playing for revenge anymore. I was playing for control. Kairos had no idea who he was messing with. And soon, he would realize just how far I was willing to go to end this once and for all. I reached into my jacket and pulled out my phone, sending a quick message to Sarah. "It's done. I've got him cornered. Bring the team in." I didn't wait for a response. I knew the message would get through. It was time to end this. Kairos was going to talk, whether he wanted to or not. And when he did, the entire operation was going to crumble around him. No more secrets, no more games. He was mine now. And nothing was going to stop me from bringing this to a head. Kairos stood there, frozen in place, the weight of the moment heavy in the air. I had him. The man who thought he could play with my life, my marriage, had no idea what kind of game he was actually in. And as I stared him down, I could see the cracks forming in his resolve. He had been so confident just moments ago, so sure that he was going to walk out of this unscathed. But now, that confidence was crumbling. The fear was creeping into his eyes, and I could see it. He was finally realizing that this wasn't his victory. It was mine. The silence between us was suffocating. For a long moment, we just stood there, eyes locked, neither one willing to break first. My mind raced through everything that had led me to this point: Vespera's betrayal, Kairos's manipulation, the lies, the schemes, the coldness with which they had both plotted to end my life. And yet, here I was, standing tall. alive, and ready to destroy everything they had worked so hard to build. You thought you could get away with this? I finally spoke, my voice low, like gravel grinding in my throat. It felt good to say those words. It felt good to know that he was the one who was cornered now, not me. You thought you could kill me and just walk away? Kairos opened his mouth, no doubt trying to come up with some excuse, some justification. But I didn't let him. I stepped closer, my boots heavy on the concrete floor as I moved. The adrenaline surged in my veins, every step fueling the fire inside me. I wasn't here to negotiate. I wasn't here for a conversation. This wasn't about understanding. This was about justice. This was about making sure that he never hurt anyone again. You're not walking away from this, I continued, my voice cutting through the air. You're done, Kairos. And I'm going to make sure you stay that way. His eyes flashed with panic as I stepped even closer, closing the gap between us. His confidence, that smug arrogance, had completely evaporated. I saw him swallow, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. He had no more lies, no more tricks left. He had no way out. I had him. You think you've won, Kairos muttered, trying to regain some semblance of control. But his voice was shaky, uncertain, and the longer he spoke, the more I could see his facade cracking. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Actually, I said, a small smirk tugging at my lips, I know exactly who I'm dealing with. I stepped closer, my face inches from his, and I could see the fear finally taking root in his eyes. You've been playing with the wrong guy. And now, I'm going to make sure you pay for what you've done. His eyes flickered to the door, to the shadows of the men who had been working with him. But I knew. There was no backup coming. There were no more tricks to be played. The game was over. His men weren't showing up to save him. This was between him and me now. And he was about to find out just how much of a mistake he'd made. You don't have a choice, I said, grabbing his collar and lifting him off the ground, pulling him toward me. His feet barely touched the floor as I held him there, his eyes wide with fear, his breath shallow. He was a shadow of the man he had been just minutes ago. You're going to tell me everything. You're going to tell me who else is involved in this, everything you know about Victor, about the operation, and why the hell you thought you could get away with murdering me. I saw him flinch, his mouth opening and closing like he was trying to find the words. But the truth was, he had no answers left. He was too far gone. His lies had caught up to him, and now he was powerless. I could feel the tension in the air as the seconds ticked by, his panicked breath rushing against my face. And for a moment, I almost felt a flicker of sympathy. But I pushed it away. Sympathy had no place here, not anymore. He broke. I saw it in his eyes. The fight drained from him as he realized he had no way out. Victor's behind all of this, he finally confessed, his voice cracking, his face pale with fear. He's been controlling everything. The money. The deals. All of it. You were just a target. A way to get to the bigger prize. The words hit me like a freight train. Victor. The name echoed in my head, sending a ripple of shock through me. I'd known something bigger was at play, but hearing it confirmed, hearing it from Kairos's lips was a punch to the gut. The man I was dealing with wasn't just some low-level thug. He wasn't just some petty criminal. No, Victor was the mastermind. And this had all been part of a much larger scheme. I tightened my grip on Kairos's collar, pulling him closer, my voice low, dangerous. Where is he? Where is Victor? Kairos's eyes flickered, and for a moment, I thought he might try to lie again. But then he sagged in my grip, defeated. He wasn't going to play anymore. He wasn't going to pretend that he could outsmart me. He was too far gone, and he knew it. Victor's gone underground, he said, his voice barely a whisper. He's got a safe house on the outskirts of town. That's where he's been running things. That's where the rest of the operation is. My heart pounded in my chest. The safe house. It was the key to everything. If I could find Victor, I could dismantle the entire operation. But I wasn't going to make the mistake of underestimating him like I had with Kairos. No. Victor was a different beast entirely. I let Kairos drop back into the chair, his body slumping with the weight of his defeat. He was done. But this was just the beginning. The real battle was coming, and I was ready for it. I pulled out my phone, my fingers moving quickly as I typed out the message to Sarah, Victor's at a safe house on the outskirts of town. We go in tonight. I need backup. Within seconds, I received her reply, on it. Be careful, Jason. This isn't over yet. I knew she was right. This wasn't over. Kairos had cracked, but there was still Victor, still the entire criminal operation to take down. But for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of certainty. I wasn't going to be the one on the run anymore. I wasn't going to be the one trying to survive. No. This time, I was the one who was going to take control. And when the dust settled, Victor and his empire would be nothing more than a memory. The calm before the storm was over. The safe house where Victor had been hiding was just up ahead. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. Everything had led to this. The last few hours had been a blur. Kairos had broken, spilling everything he knew, and now all that was left was to find Victor and end this once and for all. But as the minutes ticked by, I could feel the anticipation building, the steady hum of adrenaline in my veins, pushing me forward. The closer I got, the tighter the knot in my stomach became. This wasn't just a raid. This wasn't just another job. This was personal. I had prepared for this. I had spent years in the field, fighting battles that felt like they would never end. Always on the edge, always with my back against the wall. But this was the culmination of everything I had been through, the lies, the betrayal, the fear of losing everything. It had brought me to this moment, standing outside the safe house, knowing that once I stepped through that door, there was no turning back. Sarah's team was already in place, positioned around the perimeter of the building. I had to admit, having her by my side despite everything felt like a lifeline. We had been through too much together for me to doubt her loyalty now. Her voice crackled through the earpiece as she checked in, her calm demeanor a sharp contrast to the storm inside me. Jason, you're clear. On your mark. I nodded to myself, even though I knew she couldn't see me. I'm moving in, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos that raged in my chest. The building loomed ahead, its dark windows reflecting the cold night air. I could hear the distant sounds of the city, the occasional car passing by. But here, in this secluded part of town, everything felt unnervingly quiet. The kind of silence that makes you question every sound, every footstep, every breath. I stepped forward, my movements calculated, the gun tucked firmly in my hand. I had trained for this, but there was a difference between being prepared for a mission and actually stepping into the lion's den. And I was stepping into the lion's den tonight. The building was 2 stories, not large, but the walls held secrets I was determined to uncover. I could hear the faint murmur of voices inside as I approached the front door. They didn't know I was coming. They didn't know that the walls were closing in on them, that their time was running out. As I reached for the door handle, a surge of adrenaline washed over me, my senses heightening. Every nerve in my body was on edge. I was about to walk into the unknown, and for the first time in a long time, I was aware of just how much was at stake. The door creaked open slowly, the faint sound almost unbearable. I froze for a split second, listening. No movement from within, no sudden voices or footsteps. Just the eerie quiet that seemed to stretch on forever. It was as if the building itself was holding its breath. I slipped inside, my shoes making no sound against the worn floorboards. I knew the layout of the place, but that didn't mean I wasn't on high alert. I moved silently through the dimly lit hallway, my eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. The door at the end of the hall creaked open, and I saw movement. 3 men, their voices low and hushed. I recognized one of them immediately. Victor. He was standing with his back to me, talking to one of his associates. The other 2 men were positioned by the door, watching, waiting. They hadn't noticed me yet. I had to move fast. I couldn't risk them catching on before I was in position. I pressed my back against the wall, just outside the doorframe. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. My heart was pounding now, the noise in my ears deafening. This was the moment. This was the endgame. I stepped into the room, gun raised, my body moving on instinct, no hesitation. Victor, I called, my voice cold and sharp, cutting through the tension in the room like a knife. He froze, turning around with that same smug expression on his face, the one that had made me want to strangle him from the moment I laid eyes on him. But now, I saw the fear in his eyes, the same fear that had been in Kairos's eyes just hours before. He didn't expect me to be standing there, gun pointed directly at him. "Jason," Victor said, his voice low, but there was a tremor there. He was trying to maintain control, but I could hear the panic in his voice. "You think you've won? You think you can just waltz in here and end everything?" "I'm not here for your speeches," I replied, my voice steady, unwavering. "You're done. This ends tonight." Victor's eyes flickered to his men, who were slowly inching toward their own weapons. But they didn't move fast enough. I could already see the fear in their eyes, too. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I wasn't just some man on the run. I wasn't just some pawn in their game. I was in control now. "You have no idea what you're messing with," Victor sneered. But there was no conviction behind it. I could see it in the way his hands shook, the way his jaw tightened in fear. "I know exactly who I'm messing with," I said, my voice cutting through the air. "You thought you could just control everything. You thought you could manipulate me, manipulate everyone around you. But you made one fatal mistake. You underestimated me." Victor took a step forward, his hands raised in a show of surrender, but I wasn't fooled. I wasn't buying it. "Please," he begged, his voice almost pleading now. "We don't have to do this. I can make things right. Just give me a chance, Jason. I'll make you a deal." "There's no deal," I said, my voice growing colder with each word. "You're finished." The two men at the door moved, but I was faster. In one smooth motion, I raised my gun and fired, knocking one of them to the floor with a single shot. The other hesitated, his eyes wide with terror. He didn't want to die. They never did. Victor looked over at him, then back at me, his face twisted with desperation. "You don't have to do this," he shouted, but I didn't hesitate. He was a criminal, a killer, and I wasn't going to let him walk away. I stepped forward, gun still raised, and my gaze never leaving Victor's. "This is your end," I said. "This is where it all ends for you." The last words he spoke were lost in the sound of his own blood rushing in his ears. In the end, the man who thought he controlled everything had no control over his own fate. He was gone. With Victor's empire crumbling at my feet, I looked around the room, taking a deep breath. I was alive. I had won. And for the first time in years, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. I pulled out my phone, sending a quick message to Sarah. "It's over. Victor's done. We're securing the area." The reply came almost immediately. "Good work. I'll send the team in." As I stood there, the cold night air filling my lungs, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't the same man who had walked into that warehouse. I had faced my demons, faced the man who had tried to destroy me, and now I was free. Did you ever imagine the truth could be so twisted? The unexpected, gut-wrenching twist leaves everything on the line: trust, loyalty, and life itself. But here's the real question: who is truly the mastermind behind it all? After everything we've witnessed, do you think our hero has the strength to turn the tables? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. Who's really behind the scheme? And don't forget to share this video with your friends, because trust me, they won't believe how this story ends. In life, betrayal can come from the most unexpected places, and it's easy to feel powerless when others think they can control your fate. But just like in this story, you have the power to take control of your own life, to rise above the lies and manipulation, and to stand firm in the face of adversity. Never underestimate the strength within you. The lesson here is simple: don't wait for things to change, take action. Stand up for yourself, hold those who wrong you accountable, and remember, your courage can bring down even the most powerful enemies. Stay strong,